What is going on, everybody? Welcome on into the Heat Shack Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com, where today we are getting you set for a big check to be handed out this weekend. It is the Tour Championship at the East Lake Golf Club. The top 30 golfers in the Fedex Cup Playoff standings are there to decide who is bringing home the moolah this weekend. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, joined here as always by Brandon Gdula. He is the managing editor for numberFire. Brandon, the Tour Championship begins on Friday. How you doing?
Oh, great. I mean, Tour Championship, you got to love the modified format that we have with DJ starting 10 under, Jon Rahm 8 under. I mean, it's super not confusing. It makes it really fun to figure out.
But is it more confusing than having multiple people celebrating? Like in the years when they've had the person win the Tour Championship who didn't win the FedEx Cup playoffs, like that feels more confusing, right?
Yes, this is, I think, less confusing, but I'm not really a fan of it. I don't know what the answer is, because this is like to reward players for the full season, and they want to have some sort of playoff. So I don't really know. All I know is this feels a little odd.
So like in NASCAR, they still have every driver will run the final race, but there are only 4 drivers eligible for the championship. But every year they've done that, a driver in the championship 4 has won the championship. And basically what I'm saying is, like, you can do it where it's less confusing and have separate season-long or separate playoff champions and event champions, but just have the ones who are in the championship hit a couple in the drink and make sure one of those 4 wins. Like, it's pretty easy to fix this thing and just, have them slack off a little bit.
So, like, if we said, hey, if you're not DJ, Rahm, JT, Webb, or Morikawa, like, you gotta just tank this week.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, like, for some people, like, it's pretty easy to figure out the route for that happening. So I think that's optimal.
I don't know, because like a playoff golf format is tough to figure out, because match play is not always it, because match play is like a different type of golf. So it seems weird to crown the champion based on a match play tournament. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. All I know is I prefer what we got last week with a really tough course than probably what we'll get this week with the strokes just kind of not predetermining the winner, because we saw Rory come back last year. But I don't know. It just feels too odd.
I like it because, again, like, I don't want the confusion of different people celebrating. I want it to be pretty cut and dry. It's not cut and dry for DFS. Like, it definitely complicates things to have golfers starting at different strokes. So we're going to break that down, and discuss our favorite golfers of the weekend here in just a bit. But first, a quick reminder, we got a lot of stuff popping right now on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Tom Vecchio has you covered on the NHL and NBA side with the Daily ISO and the Daily Deke. Those go up every night, so you have plenty of time to listen to those before lock for those respective sports. We also have the Solo Shot, an MLB DFS podcast every weekday. That's on YouTube at 9 a.m. Eastern, and then on the DFS feed shortly after that. We have this PGA podcast, of course, which will continue into football season as well. And speaking of next week, football season is back as well. Heat check back to our regular schedule. I believe we have not actually discussed this, but whatever. I'll say 10 a.m. Thursday and 9 a.m. Monday with the recap podcast, but maybe I'm stepping out of bounds there. I don't know. We'll see. Regardless, we're going to have 2 NFL podcasts per week starting next week. So make sure you are, not 2 next week, 1 next week, 2 the week after that, whatever. Anyway, subscribe to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed so that you are not dependent on telling you when they'll be there. They will just show up when they are posted. So make sure you are subscribed wherever you consume your podcasts to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. All right, let's take a look at the Tour Championship here. It is at East Lake Golf Club. It is 7,319 yards and a par 70. From a logistical perspective, I would note that the event starts Friday instead of Thursday because of Labor Day weekend. They do play into Monday, so one additional day to destroy your lineups before lock. And this course has been hosting the Tour Championship for a long time, so plenty of course data. But no, if you're looking at last year's finishes, you need to note how many strokes the golfers had to start. So look at strokes gain data, look at their actual however many strokes they finished under par while playing rather than where they finish, because that will be influenced based on where they start and should not be a factor in deciding their course history. This is a final event of the Fedex Cup Playoffs. As mentioned, it's a 30 golfer field, so obviously there is no cut. But some golfers will start under par due to their standings in the playoffs. And salaries account for that because, finishing points do matter quite a bit. So Dustin Johnson will start at 10 under, for example. He is $14,400. John Rahm is second at 8 under. Justin Thomas is 7 under, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to account for that, as it will alter their projected finishing positions, and that does matter. And that also requires an important knowledge of what the finishing bonuses are on FanDuel. So just briefly to go through those, you get 30 points to finish first, 20 points for second, 18 for third, 16 for fourth, 14 for fifth, and it goes down by 2 until you get down to the 8-9 swing. There, it's just 1 point for each position on down. 11th to 15th, all score 5 points. 16th to 20th are 4, et cetera, et cetera. So basically, you want the 30 points for a win. The incremental drop-off after that it's a lot smaller. So basically, you want to get that 30-point win bonus. So Brandon, what are you seeing here at Eastlake as far as consideration from a golfer perspective before we talk about who is where in the FedEx Cup playoffs?
Yeah, so for Eastlake specifically, it generally plays tough. It's a course where you need driving accuracy. It's a little more important to be accurate at Eastlake than it is on the general PGA Tour course, according to Data Golf's information. The birdie rates from the fairway and rough don't deviate from the tour average. At least they didn't last year. But it's not the worst week, I think, to bump up driving accuracy more than you probably typically do. That's what helped Chez Reavie finish 8th last year from a $7,100 price tag on FanDuel. That said, 8 of the 11 players to tie for a top 10's finish were top 12 in distance gained, so you don't really want to ignore distance either. So that's why I'm just rolling that up into strokes gained off the tee. But my key stats this week, number one, strokes gained approach, which is always the case. Strokes gained off the tee is still going to be more important for me than driving accuracy, but driving accuracy will get weighted in a bit. Birdie or better rate, especially for golfers who are starting toward the back of the field. And then strokes gained putting. If you have Bermuda splits, that's what you would want. If not, strokes gained putting overall, always worth kind of factoring in. Just don't overinflate it. But I really think that you need to make birdies this week, and the best recipe for that is hitting fairways, having good irons, and making putts.
So I did this a little bit different. I looked at, again, full season stats, where golfers finished in the top half of the field versus the bottom half. Last year, and this is not based on finish, this is based on actual strokes gained within the event. The top half of the field, their median ranking in driving distance for the full season was 34th. The bottom half was 77th in distance. They were 79th in accuracy, whereas the top half is 102nd in accuracy. So the top half golfers tended to be golfers who were longer off the tee. 2018, the median for the top half was 29th in distance, 53rd for the bottom half. Accuracy was 94th for the top half and 131st for the bottom half. So there it was. Accuracy did matter there, but then distance mattered more. So I wound up going distance over accuracy for my off the tee stats because it did seem like, I mean, this could just be like because better golfers tend to be longer. Is that what you would assume is playing into that there?
Yeah, I mean, that's always the case. That's why it's so hard to figure out like the optimal way to look at distance versus accuracy, because the best golfers generally are long off the tee, but that doesn't mean that they can't hit fairways. It's just they're okay missing fairways whenever it is advantageous to be longer. So just straight driving accuracy is always going to be a flawed stat, because if you're not long, you have to be accurate. So a lot of the bottom tier golfers who aren't long enough are going to be accurate, or else they wouldn't be good enough to be on the PGA Tour. But you take some of the longest drivers in a field, and they should be able to club down and hit a fairway whenever they need to. So
Right.
again, distance is important, accuracy is important, but if you really just want to make it simple, use strokes gained off the tee, which is going to matter this week.
That makes sense for sure. Now, this is the second year we've seen this format where golfers start with different stroke levels. And in both years, FanDuel has accounted for that by fluctuating salaries to account for that. Did you learn anything from last year when looking at like optimal lineups and trying to decipher what the preferable build looks like there?
Yeah, so I mean, it's going to matter what happened last year. It's not going to necessarily reflect what happened this year, but it's probably going to feel like you have to play Dustin Johnson. But last year, that guy was Justin Thomas at 14,200. He finished third, but didn't make the optimal. If he's not going to win, he's not really worth the 14,000 plus salary. Last year's optimal included one golfer from every range, like the 12,000s, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. So I thought that was pretty interesting. The real difference maker was Shez Reavie at $7,100. His draft percentage was 4.2%, but Rory was 11.4. Brooks was 12.1 on FanDuel in terms of salary. Both were above 46% rostered. So you're not going to be able to find necessarily 6 under-the-radar plays, but you can make the case that some of the really expensive options aren't all worth it if they don't win, which is what we saw last year. And Patrick Cantlay started -8, but tanked and was 21st, and that was not a good showing by any means.
Right, and it doesn't matter where you start if you can't stay there and you can't get the good finish. And there are going to be golfers who just go nuts and finish well. So I think that it's worth reiterating the way that the scoring works on FanDuel, because again, you get 30 points for a win, but that drops down to 20 for second and then declines by 2 from there on out. So I think that the way you phrase it is you kind of need that win out of Dustin Johnson in order to truly justify that salary. I think you can better justify John Rahm and Justin Thomas because they're 12.5 and 12,000, whereas DJ is 14.4. So I don't know. We're going to talk about DJ in a second, but do you think it is as easy where you can calculate DJ's win odds based on whether it be betting odds or your simulations and kind of dictate your exposure based on that? Or is that oversimplifying things?
It might be oversimplifying because look, if you want to take whatever it is, betting odds, simulations, they're usually pretty close in golf. They're never 5 to 10 percentage points off because it's not how it works. Even in a 30-person field, it just doesn't work that way. But if you, let's say, build an optimizer to figure out how can I get the most percentage points of win equity with a FanDuel lineup, that's going to include a lot of the top favorites, specifically 3 of them. That said, if Dustin Johnson finishes 5th, he's not going to be a great FanDuel value at that salary. If you still hit the winner, does Dustin Johnson become irrelevant? I don't think so. But to play him, you kind of really want a win. And so I do think maybe you can kind of go from the angle of what are the chances he wins, which is about 25%. Because look, he's starting 10 under, but he doesn't have 10 strokes on everybody. He has 10 strokes on the bottom few. So I think that you really need DJ to win if you're going to play him. Unless you're looking at a head-to-head and you just want the highest floor, then DJ is very easy to justify because the odds that he finishes outside the top 10 are pretty astronomically low.
Right. And we'll talk more about this as we go along. So I think it's an important thing to consider, but we'll get back to that. We're going to talk about Rahm. We're going to talk about DJ and how they mesh together later on the podcast. But first, the NBA playoffs are back in full swing, and FanDuel has you covered. Compete in the Mountain Dew NBA Free Play daily from now through September 7th for your chance to win your seat in a virtual event with NBA legends Gary Payton and Ray Allen. With each entry, you'll also be entered into the King of the Mountain 3-point bonus for your chance to win a share of $15,000 brought to you by Mountain Dew, official sponsor of the NBA. For more details, visit FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app today. Eligibility restrictions apply. Let's take a look at past history here at East Lake. As mentioned, they've been coming here for a long time now, which means we can look at history Not everyone's going to have course history because I may not have qualified for this before, but one guy who has done so and one guy who has done well here is Sandra Charfley. No shocker that Xander would do well in a no-cut event, especially against a tough field. Brandon, he's $9,500. What do you see with Xander for this weekend?
Yeah, $9,500. I think Xander is. I would very. He's going to be probably the most popular golfer on FanDuel at the salary. Now he's just been like okay the past few weeks, but has 2 straight top 25s. I mean, he's been top 25 in 7 straight finishes, which seems weird. Seems like the sentiment on Xander is either he's like overrated and shouldn't really be priced where he is in betting markets, which I understand. But then there's also, I think, people who like Xander, including myself, like Xander because of the potential, which has definitely been here at East Lake. He's shown that. He's won here. He's finished 7th. He was 2nd last year with the adjusted scoring. Schauffele has gained strokes tee to green in 83% of his 12 rounds, according to Fantasy National, which is the highest rate of anyone in the field. Nobody else is above 75%. I know it's a small sample, but you want to see that consistency tee to green. And he showed that. He's not particularly a good Bermuda putter, but he's putted well at East Lake. And I don't know if maybe it's more of it might be less of a putting surface thing and more of an actual green thing, but I really don't think there's anything to worry about with Xander, especially at $9,500. So what are you doing with Sandra Charfley this week?
I think that he's in a tier that I don't like that much, which means that I'm naturally going to like him more because I think that he does grade out well relative to that tier. I think like the 9,000 range as a whole is unattractive. There are 2 golfers within it who I think are pretty solid. Those are Sandra Charfley and Tony Fenow. Everyone else doesn't really do it for me. So I think as a result of that, I am okay going a bit more top heavy and getting like 3 golfers at 10,000 or higher and then getting 3 value-ish plays. But when I'm in this range, I feel like Xander's going to be like the no-brainer guy who I turn to just because like everyone else in this range doesn't do that much for me. So I kind of feel like he has to grade out well naturally. And it's not even like I'm doing this out of reluctance. I think like he's objectively a good option. He just gets bumped up because everyone else is not that attracted to me. Are you getting a similar vibe from him?
Yeah, I think what's going to happen is people are going to build their lineups and be somewhere in like the 9,000 range for their final few average golfers. And I get it's mostly sorted by their starting strokes, and Xander is only 3 under. But how many people really want to get up to Sungjae Im for an extra $100 for an extra stroke, or Harris English for $300 extra? Hideki's $500 extra. I like Hideki again this week, but it's not one of those spots where Xander is only a few hundred more than Sungjae Im, so it's like I really need to get to him. I can just take the savings and play Xander. So
right.
I would imagine Xander is number 1 in popularity on FanDuel this week. He is tied for first on fansharesports.com in terms of tags early on in the week. So what do you do with someone popular like that? Again, popular golfers made the optimal lineup last year. I don't think you have to fade Xander, but you can make the case to do that if you really want.
Yeah, I think that is a good way to view it, where you can make the case for it, but I don't think you have to either. And I think that if you want to avoid Xander, I wouldn't do it in favor of someone else in this tier. I think I would just avoid this tier. Like if you're going to avoid him, avoid this entire tier. I think that's the way that I view it. Let's talk about another guy who was 3 under alongside Xander. It's Rory Mcilroy. And we don't know if Rory's going to play this weekend as of Tuesday. He's on baby watch, and he flat out said he doesn't know if he's going to play. So this could be irrelevant by the time you listen to this. Honestly, that might be optimal. Save me from myself, because I kind of want to use Rory, even knowing he might not finish the weekend. Rory, 10-2. He went bananas at East Lake last year. He won the Tour Championship because he was 13 under without accounting for his pre-tournament standing. He gained 11 strokes tee to green. Nobody else gained more than 8.7, and only 2 others gained more than 5.7. The year before that, Rory was 3rd tee to green. So Rory lukewarm recently, but we know that he can do well here, and Bermuda is his best surface. So, Brandon, let's say we get to Friday, Rory is still entered. Are you going to roll the dice on him at all?
you don't play Rory in a cash game, such as a head-to-head or a double-up. But if we find out that Rory is not necessarily – if there's a lot of sentiment that is negative toward Rory, I think that makes him an ideal pivot in a 30-person field. So I think Rory is shaping up to be a premier tournament play. But for all we know, he might be – I mean, he was the most popular golfer here last year on FanDuel. He might be that anyway this year. And if that's the case, I would avoid and maybe play the angle that he does withdraw.
So basically what we need to do is make sure the world knows that Rory could be a flight risk. I don't know if that's the right way to phrase that. But like, let's let everyone know that Rory could bail at any time so that they don't use him, and then we can beef him up in tournaments. That's like a plan.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that by Friday that will be well known. Yeah. I think Rory's a good process play. I've been on Rory for like weeks now. I was a little less on him. I was like, I don't want to get too cute last week and recommend Rory. So I kind of took him out of my picks. Yeah. But I like Rory as a process play, even with everything that's going on. It's just more, you don't really play him in a head-to-head because you can't risk having like the only zero in the field.
Right.
So I think Rory is tournament only.
And I think the good thing is if you're in this range in cash games, you have other options who are here, who we'll talk about later on. Like Bryson's there, Berger's there, Hideki's there, who you like. So it's not as if like it's a massive letdown that you can't use Rory in a head-to-head. But for tournaments, I agree. I think he's really, really fun. I'm hoping people will not be into him as a result of the risk that is definitely there and definitely legitimate. Let's move on to Billy Horschel. Brandon, Billy Horschel starting this event at, he's even because he will get no bump here, but that also means he is $7,000 on FanDuel. What have you seen with Horschel in the past at Eastlake?
So he has 12 rounds at Eastlake since I think 2012, which is as far back as Fantasy National goes, but he's gained tee to green in 75% of them. He is one of 3 winners in the field, the others being 2 golfers we already talked about, and Xander and Rory, who's won here twice. Billy Horschel won in 2014, but was also runner-up in 2018. Great Bermuda putter. The iron play has been more good than bad lately, and he's only $7,000, which is the minimum on FanDuel. Again, he is 10 strokes off the lead, but he only have 30 options, and if you want to play Dustin Johnson, you're going to be in the $7,000 range somewhere. And I don't think Billy Horschel is really a bad process play. So I'm in punting with Horschel. Can you get there even though he's starting 10 off the lead?
Let's talk about Kevin Kisner here.
Okay.
Actually, Kisner's not that appealing. Just kidding. We're going to talk about it. But I think that Horschel... It's between Horschel and Hovland among the guys who are in the low 7,000s as guys who could potentially make a run at it. Hovland has very serious known issues, specifically with his short game, whereas Horschel can do well with his ball striking and has good short games. So I think that for that reason, I would go Horschel over Hovland among the minimum salary guys. Would you agree with that, where Horschel's 1, Hovland's probably 2?
Among the straight up minimum?
Well, like around there-ish, because Kisner's 7-1.
Well, I would say I'd still go Hovland over Horschel.
Okay.
I think like Hovland both? Has that. Yes, I like both.
Okay, cool. I do too.
I would go Hovland.
Okay.
Because he's the better tee to green player, and I would rather bank on that pretty much every time, especially if I'm looking in this low range. Horschel's so good on Bermuda as a putter that it's a little scary to prefer Hovland, who's terrible everywhere. And
no, he's okay on bent grass. That doesn't matter for this week, but he's been fine there.
I'm going Hovland over Horschel this week.
I go Horschel over Hovland. Do you want to make this our bet?
Sure.
I don't feel like super committed to it, but like we can just add this one because why not? So I have FanDuel points, Horschel versus your Hovland. All right. Let's talk about Kevin Kisner, because this is a distance course for me at least, but you are not looking at as much distance. So let's talk about Kevin Kisner. Kisner does not have distance, but still managed to perform well here in the past, and he's low salaried at $7,100. Kisner has made the Tour Championship 2 of the past 3 years. Finished third in 2017. He was 3 under for the tournament last year. The problem is that he did this almost entirely with his short game. In 2017, he lost 2.1 strokes ball striking. Last year, he lost 1.7. So Kisner seems like a value play, and he seems like a guy with good course history, but that course history is not via ball striking at all, and at least to me, he doesn't fit this course. So I'm avoiding Kisner despite the good course history, but you are more into accuracy than distance this week. So does Kisner do anything for you personally?
Yeah, I think he's fine for the salary.
Where would you rank him relative to Hovland and Horschel?
Probably third.
Okay.
It's more a matter of, I might. He's kind of on par with Horschel, I guess. It's more like they're both going to hit fairways and they both can putt.
Yeah.
Which is not nothing, I guess. I don't really love the long-term iron play from either. So it's really, they're not that different. I'm sure Kisner Horschel is probably a better play. I'm surprised they got Hovland over Horschel in our bet there. But
would you go with Kisner over Horschel as well?
I think so, yeah.
So let's do both then.
Okay. Look, like
I mean, I shouldn't overextend myself in like with hitching all my wagons to Billy Horschel, but whatever. There's no actual money on the line here, so why not?
Yeah, I mean, they're both pretty it's a very similar profile. I think I just prefer Kisner to Horschel, and that's coming from someone who's like, if you want to play Billy Horschel, that's fine. I'll probably play Billy Horschel. Especially if I'm hunting for...
So you're okay with all 3 of these guys, Horschel, Hovland, and Kisner, from a value perspective?
Yes. I don't want to play Cam Champ. I don't want to play Cam Smith. And I don't want to play Mackenzie Hughes. But I'm fine with the other 3 super cheap options.
Cool. Okay. I think that makes sense. We'll do Horschel versus Hovland and Horschel versus Kisner. Let's go, Billy. Do not let me down. Let's take a look at golfers who are golfing well right now. And we'll start that discussion by talking about the 2 golfers who will start the event at the top of the leaderboard in Jon Rahm and Dustin Johnson. Brandon, you've got Rahm. What do you see coming off that disgusting win last week?
Yeah, second win in 5 starts at tough courses for Rahm. Starts just 2 strokes off the lead from DJ. He always gains strokes off the tee. He can really light it up with the irons and the putter. I said this about Jason Day, but he was like back when it was that glimmer of hope for Jason Day. Like Rahm can lead a field at tee to green and with putting, and that is a very scary combination. His putter is like borderline elite, and we don't really talk about it that much. He hasn't putted well at Eastlake. He's not a good Bermuda putter compared to his other surfaces, so that is a concern if we're nitpicking, and we should nitpick at the top. All that being said, Rahm is 4th in strokes gained tee to green over the past 50 rounds. He is 5th in 2020 when adjusting for field strength, according to Data Golf. So, I mean, it's really hard to hate Jon Rahm starting at 8 under. So, talk to me about DJ, and then we'll figure out like what we're doing at the top.
Yeah, so you talked a couple weeks ago about how DJ is like known for having these hot streaks, and I think it's pretty fair to say he's on one of them right now. And if you want to get DJ, you got to pay the piper because he's $14,400 and will start 10 under. It's a hefty toll, but could be worth that. We've seen Johnson just be white hot recently. He has gained a combined 17.9 strokes and approach the past 2 weeks, which is disgusting. That is in addition to his 7.3 off the tee. He was golfing well the 2 weeks before that too. So it's not even like this is some super small sample anymore. Like he's been for about a month playing like the best golfer in the world. Now Johnson does require a hefty salary. We can find ways to get there with, the Hovland, the Horschels, the Kisner type guys. So it's not even like we need to ruin the rest of our lineup to get to DJ. So Brandon, how are you viewing Dustin Johnson compared to Jon Rahm? Like, let's say you have one lineup. Are you going with one of those 2? And if so, which one?
I might go with someone other than those 2 if I can only pick one really expensive golfer, but I don't have to. So Between DJ and Rom, I'm leaning DJ because he is priced where he is, and perhaps that will bump down his popularity a tad. JT last year in a similar spot with a similar salary was 5th in popularity at 34%, which is still high, but compared to Rory and Brooks at about 46.5%, both of whom made the optimal, by the way.
And Rory and Brooks were in a similar position to Justin Thomas, where they weren't very far out the lead, but had high salaries.
Yeah. So,
or reduced salaries from where JT was.
Yeah. So I think you can easily fade Dustin Johnson in like tournaments and just play the angle that he finishes like 5th, because I mean, to be honest, like DJ with the lead has not been that great lately. I don't believe that he's like unable to close. I think there's a lot more that's going into it.
It's also really tough to win golf events. It's really tough.
No matter what DJ does, like he can't stop what Jon Rahm does.
Right. And he can't stop the dude from sinking a 66-foot putt. Yeah.
So like, it's not that DJ can't close, but I mean, maybe it is in his head a little bit that he's now starting with this lead, and sitting on leads lately has not been great. But I mean, what I'm dancing around is DJ's a fantastic FanDuel play, but you don't really have to play him. And I think for the salary, I'm okay preferring Jon Rahm, but because we mentioned 3 basically minimum salary golfers who I'm okay with, like Dustin Johnson's not priced out. It's just a matter of whether he wins or not.
It's also like if you do just DJ, you have like more than $9,000 left per golfer. And with all the like super low salaried golfers we like, that's really easy to get to. Yeah. So DJ by himself is easy to afford. DJ with other golfers in that range, different discussion, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But DJ, I think as a result of this, is my preferred route over Jon Rahm. I just feel better about, I don't know, like this could just be like my general aversion to Rahm. Like, I don't know. I always seem to wind up being lower than consensus when it comes to Jon Rahm, and that has bitten me plenty of times. So I'm going to go with DJ here and ride him. The problem is, I think, like you said, like if I have one lineup, I am okay passing over both. So I think that like if I have a single entry tournament lineup, I might just have neither and go Justin Thomas. But I think that choosing between the two, I would go DJ.
Yeah, I think because DJ's price isn't really an issue, just take the 2 strokes, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we're both on the same page where
within your simulations, what's the gap in win percentage for JT or for DJ versus Rahm?
In my sims, DJ's at like 26.7%, Rahm's at 23.6. So it's
okay. Good. So even accounting for the strokes, like the gap is not that big.
Yeah, it's not capped.
So based on your simulations, Rahm is the better play.
Yeah, he's a better value, but JT, I do just top 10 value just to get like an idea. So Rahm's a better top 10 value in terms of top 10% versus salary, but JT's even a little bit better than that.
Okay, cool. Let's move down to some lower salary golfers to help us afford DJ and or Rahm. Starting off with Mackenzie Hughes, another minimum salary golfer. What do you see with Hughes recently?
Yeah, I spoiled it by saying I don't want Mackenzie Hughes. I forgot.
I wasn't going to bring that up.
But, I'll explain why. He's minimum salary, same as Billy Horschel, same as Victor Hovland. Hughes is, like, looking good lately. 2 top 15s the past 2 weeks to start the FedEx Cup playoffs. He is a top-tier putter, and he's gained strokes from approach in each of the past 2 with, like, borderline neutral, like field adjusted strokes gained approach in his 3 prior events, which if you're as good of a putter as Mackenzie Hughes can be, it's okay to be somewhat neutral as a ball striker. He's been a little bit better than that lately, which is good. Now he's 29, so he's not like a young guy who's just figured some stuff out, but I mean, he's got a really elite short game. He leads the field in strokes gained around the green. If his irons are, again, kind of neutral or a little bit better, he can definitely score. That said, he's 30th in opportunities gained over the past 50 rounds. So basically, he's the worst at getting into birdie position, and the putter can only save him so often. So I think Hughes might get talked up a bit because of the finishes.
Yeah.
But statistically, he does it all kind of backwards from what we want. So I'm going to pass on Mackenzie Hughes this week. What about you?
Well, you mentioned that he's 30th in opportunities gained, but he's also dead last in approach, too, in the field, even when you account for the 2 events where things have been better. So, like, if we're going to rely on someone who is good with their short game, I'd rather go with a Horschel or a Kisner than a Mackenzie Hughes, and they're the exact same salary, or Kisner's $100 more. So I agree, pretty easy avoid for Mackenzie Hughes, and it'd be okay if people were to talk him up. Like, that would not be objectionable. That's the word. There we go. To me. Let's talk about Scottie Scheffler, because Scottie Scheffler is potentially someone who could interest us. $8,600, and he will start at 2 under. So Scheffler has some ground to make up, but he has been golfing really well of late. Scheffler has finished 22nd or better in 5 straight events, including 2 top 5s in that span. He's doing that, not shockingly, because it's Scottie Scheffler, with the ball striking. Scheffler's gained at least 4.2 strokes tee to green in all those. He gained at least 4 in approach twice and 4.2 in another. The question mark for Scheffler is a short game. His small sample on Bermuda is legitimately like gouge your eyeballs out terrible. And with him needing to go low, that is a concern. So the ball striking should be there, but there are still concerns around Scheffler overall. So Brandon, are you interested in Scottie Scheffler, $8,600?
So he is a prime tournament play. He shot at 59. We know he can score, and that's kind of what you're looking for, I think, from anyone who's not near the top pre-tournament standings. You need golfers who can climb and score enough birdies to just generate those fantasy points in general, but also climb into a better finishing bonus. Scheffler can do that. He's priced fine. I would just have to think, being priced at $8,600, being 65 to 1 to win on FanDuel Sportsbook, he kind of sticks out as like the first place to look under 9,000. So I would assume he is borderline prohibitively popular.
Okay.
And with the putter being what it is, I'm okay. Maybe, look, he's a good process play, but in a 30-person golf event, there's a lot of game theory that goes into this. So if 40 to 45% of lineups have Scottie Scheffler and he's just fine, I think you get a huge leg up and just not going to the most obvious sub 9K golfer.
And I think the other thing too is we've talked about, tiers and the quality of different tiers, and Scheffler's in a really good tier. There are 3 other golfers within like a couple $100 of him who I like a lot. So it's pretty easy for me, if he's going to be popular, to say, no thanks, I'll go elsewhere. So I would agree where straight up he's fine, but if he's going to be popular, which I would agree with your sentiment that he probably will be, I'm okay pivoting elsewhere. There are just other options that I like there, and I'm okay going elsewhere. We'll talk about all three of them actually in the player picks for me. So we'll get to those golfers eventually, but I'd agree that if Scheffler is going to be popular, I'm okay going elsewhere, just because there is a path to a pretty terrible week for Scottie Scheffler. We'll see.
Well, he's 18th in tags.
Okay.
It's early, but I mean, if he's going to be just glossed over or treated as...
Yeah. I think this range is one where I want to gauge sentiments harder than others, because I feel really solid about 4 of these guys. And if I can get one of them at super low popularity, then sign me up, because I don't think the gap between them is that small, and I will allow other things than straight up talent to dictate where I go. And I think in this case, it makes sense to consider that popularity.
So last year, 3 golfers were 44% rostered or higher. Justin Rose was 37%. So 4 golfers above 35%. So it's not like one of these golfers is going to be on 80% of lineups. Right. But when you get to like almost half of the field on a particular golfer and he just doesn't do a lot, that's like you're going to need to hit on all 6 of your golfers to have like
in
top
a 30
1%
golfer
lineup.
field. Yeah, absolutely.
If you can say, well, if It's like if all it comes down to is Scottie Scheffler being okay and he's
Right.
rostered on like 45% of lineups, about 45% of lineups are kind of not completely irrelevant, but not necessarily pushing for that top of the top. So I do think popularity deserves a ton of attention this week,
especially in areas where you have good alternatives. And I think this is one of those. So keep an eye on sentiment there. If you check out the fan share tags or whatever it may be, that will go a long way for me, at least in dictating where I go. Straight up, though, Scheffler, not my favorite play in that tier. I think that is also dictating things here. It's not like he's off the radar, but not at the top of my tier. And again, we'll go through those golfers in the player picks. But first, let's talk about the bookmaker odds for this week, which do account, obviously, for where golfers are starting. Dustin Johnson, not surprisingly, is the favorite at plus 185 at FanDuel Sportsbook. Jon Rahm is plus 280. Justin Thomas is plus 550. And then Webb Simpson, who starts at 6 under, is 10-1. There's a dip down to Colin Morikawa at 18-1. And we have Rory Mcilroy and Bryson DeChambeau right after that. Rory is 20-1. Bryson is 22. And then the top end rounds out with Daniel Berger, Hideki Matsuyama, and Sandra Charfley, who are all 27-1. So we talked about DJ and Rahm individually. JT is kind of lumped into this discussion too because he's $12,000. But their salaries are based on the odds they get a win bonus. Because again, it's a 10-point drop between first and second. They all have better odds of getting 30 points for win bonus, like if we're looking at this from an odds perspective. But in reality, only one of them will get those 30 points. That is a big thing to consider. Scoring bonuses are flatter after that. So as a result of this, Brandon, is it in your best interest to roster just one of those 3 or 4 golfers in that top group in each lineup in hopes that they will be the one who gets the 30-point bonus? Or are there enough bonus points out there available to justify taking 2 of those top 3 or 4?
I think it depends on the contest you're playing. If it is a head-to-head, I think perhaps the optimal way to go is to play 2 or 3 of the top 5 favorites and maximize the chance that you hit that winner. Because if you do not have a winner in a head-to-head and the other person does, and there's a no cut and it doesn't really matter, you're not going to get leverage on having more guys make the cut. I think that's the right way to play it. So again, play 2 of them or so in a head-to-head or small field event. In a large field event, I think you're right. I think that the better way to go is limit it to just one of the favorites. Last year, I know it's just 1 year and it's 30 golfers, but the correlation between FanDuel salary and popularity, like draft percentage, was 0.75. So basically we know the expensive golfers are going to be more popular, but with salary and FanDuel points was 0.27. So it basically says we should have a good idea of who's going to be popular, but not necessarily who's going to score the most points. Mm-hmm. So I do think you're right. Unless you're just asking me and we're on a different page, but I think you're right to bring this up.
That's where I'm at. Because I think about this a lot for NASCAR because the scoring can be pretty flat in shorter races. Think about this, Daytona, only one driver will get 43 points for a win and second gets 40 points. That's a decent drop off with the scoring being what it is. And once you assume that William Byron gets the 43 points for a win, it means that everyone else is not getting those 43 points and their expected points go down. So I think that, to me, that's why we talk about this in the NFL, but I want to play the assumption game. And I want to assume that Dustin Johnson wins in one lineup, and the bumps I'm getting from Jon Rahm and Justin Thomas matter less than. Now, I think the one angle here and the one reason you can justify using 2 is that you also get points for performance. So if you think that DJ and JT run away with it and beat the field, JT can pay off with that 20-point bonus from second just based on his birdie scores and stuff like that. So I'm not saying you use 1 in every lineup, but my default build, if I have one lineup, it's harder for me to assume that those 2 guys run away from the field. And in that case, I use one of those top 3 as opposed to 2. So there are still builds where I will have 2 in tournaments, but I think my default build will be picking one, assuming that they win, and then seeing who can pay off if I assume they're not going to get the 30 points for a win.
Is that the same for a head-to-head for you, or are you more likely?
I think you're right on head-to-heads. I think for me, like if you go DJ and Justin Thomas, that leaves you $8,400 per golfer remaining. That's doable in a cash game with the way things break here. So I think I would agree with you in cash games. Give yourself additional swipes at that 30-point bonus and hope you can get it. So, and also like there is added safety in just getting strokes. So I think for cash games, you're right. So I think we're on the same page here where you take the additional strokes in cash games and, find an assumed winner for tournaments. I think that's the way that I'd phrase it.
I like that. Yeah.
Okay, let's see here. Of the golfers whose odds aren't super short, let's say like Morikawa at 18-1 and longer, who has the best shot to get that 30-point win bonus for you in your eyes?
Bryson.
Okay, pitch me on it.
Do I talk about him later? I can't remember where.
Yeah, he's in your player picks, I think. Okay. Yeah, he is.
It's mostly that he is. And this is like strange because I'm still not used to the idea of this, but we know how good Bryson can be off the tee. I want to say tee to green, but it's not. I'm not quite there with Bryson fully tee to green. But he's such a good putter that he can rack up birdies and move up from 4 under to start. Mm-hmm. Am I saying he's going to win? No, but he is good on Bermuda. He's just a good overall putter, especially compared to the top tier ball strikers. He's that good of a putter, and he can just make birdies like crazy. He's actually first in putting over the past 50 rounds. So he's like a better putter than Webb in terms of strokes gained over the past 50. So I think Bryson is that guy for the best win odds outside of like the top, like Morikawa and down.
Well, the other thing too is you said you are valuing straight up off the tee play. Bryson's going to stand out there. I'm valuing distance. He's going to stand out there too. So I think from that angle, he fits well also. So I would agree that Bryson has good odds. I think that Rory is also in that discussion. He's only 3 under. So where I think Bryson is 4 under. So that definitely does favor Bryson. But I think that Rory, we know he's also a better putter on Bermuda. So like if we assume we get 4 rounds out of Rory, the odds that he winds up getting that 30-point win bonus are decent. So I would say Rory and Bryson are the two I'd pinpoint there as being guys who could potentially get that 30-point win bonus. And like if I'm going with a one stud lineup, like one of those top 3, I think that I'm turning to Bryson pretty often and turning to Rory as often as I can justify going, knowing full well that he might not play all 4 rounds.
Yeah, it's scary because Colin Morikawa's 5 under to start. We know what he can do, but he's like, I'm still not there with the putter. Yeah. We know he can miss short putts, and look, he can overcome that, but I just think that there are better plays than Morikawa despite starting 5 under. Yeah. So again, if I'm trying to pick the winner, it's going to be Bryson outside the top 4 in win odds. Although we didn't really talk about Webb much. I don't know if we're going to.
I'm not. I just like I'm going for distance, and
actually I am.
Okay. Well, either way, which golfers' odds have moved since things opened up at FanDuel Sportsbook?
Well, Webb Simpson was 12-1 on Monday. He's now 10-1. Okay. Hideki Matsuyama, 29-27. Tony Fenow, 50-42. Scottie Scheffler, 80-65, which is significant for sure. Brendan Todd and Sungjae Im from 100 to 80, and Joaquin Neiman from 150 to 100.
I think the Sungjae one may have been an adjustment because I don't think we realized how many strokes he was getting to begin with. Like his odds were pretty long. And I don't like in the profile, like I don't see a lot that draws me there for DFS. I think that might have just been an adjustment, like a market adjustment on him. It doesn't push me there. Are you in the same boat?
I think he is probably the best long shot outright bet because
for DFS.
But for DFS, no, I'm not.
Okay, I agree.
That intrigued, no.
Okay. Which lower salary golfers have win odds that stand out to you?
I think Xander fits just because he's 27-1 at 9,500. That really stands out. Tony Finau's 42-1 at 9,000. Patrick Reed is 50-1 at 9,200. Scottie Scheffler is 65-1 at 8,600. Brendan Todd is 80-1 at 8,900, and then Joaquin Neiman and Tyrrell Hatton are both 100-1 in the low 8,000 range. And yes, I do like Tyrrell Hatton.
I do too. He's my player picks. I was talking before about how there were a number of guys in the Scheffler range where if Scheffler winds up being popular, I'll just go elsewhere. Hatton's one of those guys. Joaquin Neiman, one of those guys. So we'll talk plenty about them in just one second. But first, let's talk about some weather for this week. As a reminder, if you're checking weather for this event, make sure you look at Friday through Monday rather than Thursday through Sunday, just because different schedule for this week for Labor Day. So account for that. But honestly, as of right now, there is no weather of note. You can play this thing pretty much straight up. So I would play this thing straight. And once we do that, Brandon, let's move into the player picks. Who stands out for you on FanDuel for DFS at the Tour Championship?
Okay, so I think we made our thoughts clear on DJ and Rahm.
Correct.
I think they're great plays. I think if they don't win, they're not that good of plays. But I want at least one or if not both of them in a cash game lineup. But correct. I think outside of that, more game theory focused. I do like Bryson a lot at $10,500. Bryson's game's not really where we all may thought it would be. I'm playing up accuracy this week a little bit, which is definitely scary, but I also know the value of distance at East Lake as well. And Bryson leads the field in putting and birdie rate gained over the past 50 rounds, according to Fantasy National. He is 11th in putting on Bermuda over a 100-round sample. If we need golfers who can climb up the leaderboard when things are clicking, Bryson has that. And for the salary, he's a really easy tournament upside process play.
I could also see Bryson not being all that popular. That would change if Rory were to withdraw before we got to Friday, because Bryson's win odds are longer than you would think for a golfer at his salary and a golfer at his standings. So I think that may signal that Bryson will be less popular, especially if people load up on the top guys. Bryson's naturally going to come in at a lower roster rate. So I think that helps me with Bryson too, and I feel pretty good about him as well. So
yeah, I think to clarify, there are going to be about 3 to 4 golfers around 40+%, and then a lot of flatter popularity from there. Yeah, in the 30%. So if Bryson's 30%, I'm fine with that. It's more the percentages of what we usually are looking for are way different this week.
Yeah. So based on last year, there's a good chance that Justin Thomas winds up being pretty popular. But I also think that he's a good process play. So he's my first high salaried pick. JT is starting 3 shots back. He's 7 under. As compensation for those 3 shots, you get a discount of $2,400 from DJ and $500 from Rahm. And that's enough for me to bite on JT. The form for JT, not as good as what those two guys have been doing, but some of that is putting. He has lost at least 1.9 strokes there in 3 of the past 4 events. And Bermuda is a better surface for Justin Thomas than bentgrass is. Thomas is 5th in the field in driving distance the past 50 rounds. He also still does lead the field in approach, as he has done for it feels like a full year now. So Justin Thomas can win the event. And if he doesn't, I think that he should score well enough in the holes where he does play. So I think that for DJ especially, and for Rahm to a lesser extent, you kind of need that win bonus. For JT, I think he can pay off independent of that. So that's why I'm more okay pairing Justin Thomas with Rahm or DJ in a tournament than pairing DJ and Rahm together. So Justin Thomas is my favorite high salary guy. And of the 3 golfers at $12,000 or higher, he will be the golfer on the highest percentage of my lineups. What are your thoughts on JT, Brandon?
Love JT. I think he's my favorite of the top 3 when you consider price and just kind of general expectation. I know the draft percentages last year kind of favored Rory at a similar salary and Brooks as well. So I don't know if we'll get a huge leverage bump, but with how good Rahm and DJ are playing and with how recently we've seen them at the top, I think that JT will not be prohibitively popular. I could be wrong on that, but I still think he's the best play.
That's the hope. The hope is that people get drawn up by those 2 guys, given what they did last weekend and the weekend before that.
And JT was in first entering this last year and didn't win. And I think he's
narrative.
I don't do the narrative stuff a lot, but I think he's got that kind of attitude where he's like probably still mad about that.
Hopefully. Let's go. Get angry, JT. Who else do you like in this upper register on FanDuel?
I like Webb Simpson as, again, just a sheer what I thought was going to be pivot, but he is tied for first on Fanshare Sports and sentiment and tags. So I'm a little, maybe this isn't the right assumption to make, but I figured with where everyone else was and Webb not playing last week that he would be not that like popular, but it's very possible he just didn't really want to play last week when he saw how tough it was going to be. I don't know, but he's fourth in the FedEx Cup. He's -6 to start. He's such a good overall golfer that there's never a place where I can't play him. He's accurate. He putts very well on Bermuda. Honestly, any golfer at 10,000 or above is in a good spot, aside from maybe Rory, just because of the withdrawal concerns. But
sure.
Again, I'm going to let popularity dictate a lot of my builds, but I didn't want Webb or Morikawa really to go. Maybe no one's going to play Morikawa because there's got to be someone here who's the lowest, like the least popular. I want to find that golfer.
Like if you told me this, like without looking at the Fanshare tags, I would have thought it would have been Webb, just because it's like there are a lot of shiny objects around him.
Yeah, I'm surprised by that. I guess it is Morikawa right now. I mean, things can change, but like if people were out on Morikawa, I'll play Morikawa despite the putting concerns.
Yeah.
Like that's just how I view it because we don't know what's going to happen. And if Morikawa were to do what Colin Morikawa can do, like he can win.
Yeah.
Outright. So
right.
He's 5 under.
Yeah. And Morikawa's in the 10,000 range. I like that range a lot. One of the guys I like in there is Daniel Bergers. Let's talk about him here. He's 10-3 and he will start at 4 under par. You have to pay $500 extra to get to 5 under, which is Morikawa, and $1,000 to get to 6 under, which is Webb. So Berger's salary does line up favorably for where he's starting. Berger's distance the past 50 rounds is not great relative to the field, but not a negative. And meanwhile, the irons have been a plus for him for sure. He's 9th in the field there the past 50 rounds. He's also a better putter on Bermuda than he is on bentgrass. That should provide a lift for him. And I mean, we've seen Berger golf really well for a large sample. He is in a good position to open things up here. So when you combine that with the acceptable salary at 10-3, I think that Berger seems like a standout option again. And like I think that I wouldn't rank him above Bryson. And if I didn't have concerns around the baby with Rory, I wouldn't have concerns around Rory. But I think that Berger's another guy. And I think this is again, I want to attack the tiers I feel best about. This range between Morikawa and Rory is an awesome range, and I want to be in there pretty often. So any thoughts for you on Berger?
Like him, all things considered, the win odds are doable. So if you're just going to play the angle that DJ and Rahm don't win, I think you need to really look at this range because you don't want to say, well, DJ and Rahm aren't going to win. Obviously, you're going to be here, and it's a loaded tier, this 10,000 rate, because you're basically getting golfers who should be in the 11,000s in a typical field,
right? But
at 10,000, and if you throw Xander in there at 95, and
again, the other thing too is if you take away the 30-point win bonus, assume that DJ or Rahm wins that, then the difference, you shouldn't. You don't need to get as big of a salary bump as we're getting on these guys once you take that 30-point bonus out of play. So, I think if we assume that DJ or Rahm wins, these guys then become awesome second and third studs to plug in there. So, yeah. I think that if you were looking at this just straight up based on golf and not factoring in the win odds, they're amazing, amazing plays. And that's the way I kind of want to play things here.
Yeah, and if you play Rahm and he's your stud and he wins,
right,
and Daniel Berger comes second,
exactly.
That's so. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe this isn't even helping anybody, but it's This is the top 30 in the field. There are about maybe 8 golfers I don't really want to play, but that leaves a massive percentage of the field that I'm fine playing. So it's more about game theory this week if you're playing tournaments.
And for me, it's more about finding the right tiers I want to be in, and Berger's in that tier. Sandra Charfley is not in a tier that I like, but let's move down to the middle range. And that the tier distaste does not translate to Xander. He is kind of like the lone wolf who I like there. So talk to me about Xander at $9,500.
He's finished first, seventh, and second here the past 3 years. I think he's. I think he might be like the best DFS value that I've seen in a long time.
Yeah.
The biggest concerns are he's not a birdie maker. He prefers courses where it's tougher, and like grinding out pars is better. But we've seen him excel at this course despite not really making a lot of birdies, despite not being a great Bermuda putter. But for what you're getting, like he's seventh in tee to green, first in bogey avoidance, which is still a little bit relevant this week, even though we need golfers who can climb. I'm just trusting Xander. I think in a cash game, he's pretty much locked in. The bigger conversation comes in if he's like 45 to 50% rostered.
Right.
I might just be okay and say if Xander finishes 12th or something, he's going to kind of not blow up a lot of rosters, but
he's not going to help them, and you can find someone else who could help you. That's like the difference there. So I agree. For cash games, absolutely. For tournaments, we'll get there when I'm in this range. But if I'm avoiding Xander due to popularity, I'm just going to avoid this tier because it's not a good tier. So my second mid-range guy is Rory Mcilroy, because I think that, again, from a tournament perspective, he is a really good play. We just have to hope that he plays all 4 rounds. Rory's 7 shots back to open things up, but you don't need him to win at 10-2, and he's just 1 shot behind most of the guys in the salary range. And Rory ranks 3rd in the field in distance the past 50 rounds. He is 7th in approach, according to Fantasy National. The ball striking hasn't been as consistent for Rory, but it hasn't been bad. He's had spike weeks still, and most of his losses have come from putting. But Rory's best surface is Bermuda. He's about neutral relative to the field on that surface the past 100 rounds. So Rory can make up ground. But again, even if he doesn't win, he can pay off via his actual golfing. So that's enough for me to buy in. How much Rory can you use, Brandon? Let's say we get to Friday. Rory is still in the field. What exposure are we talking about for tournaments? I'm thinking 25%. I can afford to burn 25% of my lineups if Rory does withdraw. What about for you?
Yeah, I think that's about right. The question is going to be, what is his overall draft percentage in those tournaments? Because if he's on still 30 to 35%, I would probably just play the angle of fading him. I don't think he's going to be like 15%. That seems highly unlikely. So I'm either realistically being like, I don't know. I might have to take a stand, honestly, and be all in or all out on Rory. And by all in, I would mean like 35 to 40%, so that I'm actually above, like overweight relative to the field.
Right.
So I think I'm gonna have to wait and see, but I'm probably leaning more toward being overweight on Rory and playing the angle that he plays all 4 rounds.
Yeah, if we make that assumption that Rory plays all 4 rounds, dynamite play. So I think that that's a good angle to play, and I might talk myself into more, but I do want to safeguard myself because I want to have some lineups to sweat throughout the weekend, and can't do that if I have a 0 from Rory. So 25 to 35, I think, is where I'm leaning there. Who else do you like in this middle tier on FanDuel?
Tony Fenow. We haven't talked about him much. $9,000. He is 10th in approach, 15th off the tee over the past 50 rounds. His putter's been better. We know that he can probably backdoor his way into another top 5. He's playing from behind, so he's starting 2 under. That's usually I would feel better with Tony Fenow starting 8 shots off the lead than starting with an 8-shot lead, because he can probably just go out and play easy, go for birdies as long as he actually goes for it. But I think Fenow is a fantastic play, even in a cash game, but in a tournament, he's one of the few golfers who really can climb up the leaderboard, make a lot of birdies.
Yeah. I'm favoring distance, which means I have to be on a Tony Fenow at 9,000. I think that he is a really, really good option in that range. In a range, again, where it's not like I like some guys beneath it, but I don't like a lot of guys right there. So I think that Tony Fenow at $9,000 makes a lot of sense. He's one of my favorite guys. I think that if we're going between 9,000 and 10,000, Tony Fenow and Sandra Charfley, your 2 picks are pretty easily my favorite 2 guys in that range. Would you agree?
Yeah, Xander Fenow, the best picks in that range.
the best golfers straight up. My second mid-salary guy is probably, like, it feels very strange to like this person. So maybe this is stupid. You can talk me out of it, but I don't mind Sebastian Munoz because he's 170 to 1 to win, which should make him a pretty tough sell in a 30 golfer field. But he honestly doesn't shape up that poorly beyond the win odds. He gets to start the event at 3 under. He has the lowest salary of any golfer at that score or better, and that's despite a solid statistical profile. Munoz in the top half of the field in distance, approach, and putting on Bermuda the past 100 rounds. He's actually 8th in Bermuda putting the past 100 rounds. So normally Munoz is an extreme value play and someone I don't really go to even as an extreme value, but he's not that, and this field is much tougher, but we're getting free strokes here. The stats aren't that bad. I'm not that concerned about salary this week because there are so many like super low salary guys I like. So I can kind of live with it if I can't find the salary to get to Fenow. I would go Fenow if I could. But like if I can't find the 300, I kind of don't hate Munoz. It feels very weird, Brandon. So is this dumb? Just tell me straight out if it's dumb.
It is not dumb.
Okay.
This is coming from someone who plays more Sebastian Munoz than anybody else on the planet. Because Munoz is a good all-around golfer.
Okay.
I think that the main reason to play him is not the stats so much as it is who's going to play Sebastian Munoz.
Us. The
Right.
two of us and no one else.
He is 25th in tags on FanShare. He is going to be one of the few leverage opportunities that we have in the entire field where we're looking at like sub 12% draft percentage probably. So I like Munoz enough as an all-around player. He is positive in all 4 strokes gained stats when adjusted for field in 2020, according to Data Golf. So that plus the leverage he gets us, you can basically play the chalkiest lineup in Sebastian Munoz. And like if Munoz somehow finishes like 5th, you're going to be like, that's definitely viable.
Well, I think the other thing too is if Scottie Scheffler does wind up rising in tags, if they're at 86 with Scheffler, they're probably not using Munoz at 87. And
Who's going to play
Sebastian?
Who's going to play Sebastian Munoz over Scheffler?
I know that you will. Well, I guess maybe not for Scheffler, but like.
Well, Scheffler and Fenow, like they're right there.
So all in on Sebastian Munoz?
You don't have.
I'm not saying all in. I'm joking about the all in part, but we're in.
I think it's viable
because
there are very few ways to differentiate without just like I'm not.
Pray for Sebastian Munoz. Pray for Sebastian Munoz. Let's move down to the value tier, which is kind of a loose range this week because two of our mid-tier guys were in this range too. But who else do you like on FanDuel for this week as a value play?
I'll go with Hovland at 7,000. We need upside from the cheap players, and he has what it takes to make a lot of birdies because he's so good as a ball striker. Again, I won't say tee to green for Victor Hovland because the chipping is who knows where it's going to be. But
just stick it on the green, man, and no one will care. Just stick it on the green.
That's the thing. That's how you make birdies. It's like around the green play doesn't really factor in for birdies unless you're Bryson and you're within 30 yards, I think. But among the 10 golfers priced 8,400 and below, only Hovland, Tyrrell Hatton, and Joaquin Neiman are in the top 10 in the field in approach. Hatton is 8,200, I think. Neiman's 84, and Hovland is minimum. So, like, we know the short game can evaporate, but I think he's still going to make enough birdies to, like, make up some ground at $7,000. So I like Hovland the most.
So we have the Hovland versus Horschel bet. We also have Horschel versus Kisner. I would go Hovland over Kisner pretty easily. So I like both Hovland and Hovland and Horschel a lot.
Make one golfer with Hovland's ball striking and
Horschel's around the green and short game. Yeah, let's go. Oh my gosh, that's like, is that like JT? Basically, well, I guess no, because Horschel's a better putter than JT. So we basically made the perfect golfer. Let's go. This is perfect. Victor Horschel, whatever. He's the number one golfer in the world. Joaquin Neiman is a guy you mentioned there as being a golfer with a lower salary who is good with his ball striking. So let's talk about him. He is on Bermuda this week. Always frightening. turn things off if you're watching once Neiman gets on the greens and just kind of hope for the best. But $8,400 gets to start 2 under. That helps a good amount. The ball striking will measure up well. Neiman is 9th in distance and 4th in approach the past 50 rounds. His third place finish last week was driven entirely by the ball striking again. Not shocking. He gained 8.1 strokes ball striking compared to 1.2 at the short game. We do know that we're going to get 4 rounds out of Neiman here, which I think is important because if he has a bad round of putting, you're still going to get 3 other rounds out of him. So I think that Neiman works well at $8,400 if you want to avoid the middle range. What are your thoughts on Joaquin Neiman, Brandon?
I like him enough at the salary. We know the approach is pretty much always there. The putting is concerning, but he's kind of in that range where it's not a full punt play, but he's also not quite as at the top of the leaderboard as Scottie Scheffler has been. Tyrrell Hatton might get a bump because he should be viewed as a better golfer than other golfers near him. So I'm not saying Neiman will be under the radar by any means, but I think Joaquin Neiman is probably my second favorite play
Behind?
below 85.
Okay.
Behind Tyrrell Hatton, like straight up.
So we'll talk about Hatton in a second. Who else do you like as a value play? Or maybe we don't have to because it's also a 30 golfer field. We don't need to go through everyone, but
it'd be Kisner.
Okay.
Yeah, he's going to hit fairways. He's going to be able to make some putts. For the salary, it's very enticing, but I would still rather try to get to like Neiman with Hovland instead of just 2 like full punt plays. So that's kind of where I am.
Okay. I think the Kisner makes sense. I've got Hatton. We've talked around him a bit, so let's talk about Hatton here. He's not super long off the tee, and that's definitely a negative for me, at least at this course, but I know that Hatton can hold up well in a tough field. He can make up for the distance elsewhere, and specifically he's making up for that distance with the irons and the putting. Hatton is 5th in approach the past 50 rounds. He is 10th in Bermuda putting the past 100 rounds. Although Hatton's not long off the tee, he's not a massive negative. He's 23rd in that stat the past 50 rounds in this field, so it's not like he's like last. Hatton's $8,200. He'll start at 2 under, tied with Neiman. I think he stands out as being someone with a higher floor than people might think. I think that Hatton's a really good option. You said you have him above Neiman in your favorite play below $8,500, correct?
Yeah. He's been good all year. He has one event in 2020 with negative approach play when adjusted for field strength, and that was the St. Jude. He is starting 2 under. I think he's the best play below 85.
And I would say Hatton is a really good option for cash games because if you lock in, I think that for me, the 2 that I'd be picking in the top end are Dustin Johnson and Justin Thomas. If I do that, I have $8,400 left per golfer. Hatton is 82. I don't want to live entirely in that range, so I'm probably still getting like a Horschel or someone like that in there. But Hatton fits really well. So I think for cash games, he is a standout and one of the first guys I turn to. Do you think he's a cash game play for you as well?
Yep, cash game, tournaments, everything for me with Joe Hatton.
All righty. So again, we were talking before about Scottie Scheffler and guys you could pivot to. I like all of Hatton, Neiman, and Munoz as being options there. So I think it's a good week to keep an eye on sentiment and try to decide where people will go and then potentially find a way for yourself to go elsewhere. Win picks for this week, Brandon, will go 1 golfer. I will say anyone you like. And then 1 golfer, 50-1 or longer. I'm going to go first because I won the bobble hat last week. And I'll go Dustin Johnson.
Okay. I think that's the right play.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So 50-1 or longer then.
Yep. After the shortening, so Fenow's out of play for you.
Yeah. A name I don't know if we've even mentioned.
Patrick Reed,
I think is.
That was my one hesitation in picking DJ is that I wanted Patrick Reed pretty badly. But I wanted DJ more than I wanted Patrick Reed, so I think that's the right pick there as well.
So in that range, I prefer Xander and Fenow a lot on FanDuel, but I think Patrick Reed could just be one of those, if Xander is on 45% of lineups, Patrick Reed is not going to be on that many lineups.
Right.
And I'm fine building a lineup I like with Xander in it and just duplicating that lineup, but subbing out Xander for Reed. I think he's a really good under the radar play if he's not getting talked up.
And like I said, I think that he is easily the choice among guys 50 to 1 or longer. So I think you made the right call there. Who would you pick for the shorter guys? You going Rahm?
Yeah, just statistically, I have to go Rahm.
Okay, so then 50 to 1 or longer. I know that Tyrrell Hatton's not super close to 50, but he's the one I feel the best about down there. So I'm going to go Hatton. He is starting 2 under, so that definitely helps at least a bit. I could go Sungjae, but like even with 2 strokes, I feel better about Hatton than I do about Sungjae. Is that a mistake?
I like Sungjae as an outright bet. I should have considered Harris English as well, just because he's 4 under. So if you look at golfers 50 to 1 or longer, Sungjae and Harris English are the only ones starting 4 under. So I don't mind Harris English, honestly. I would have probably picked him if I couldn't pick Patrick Reed.
Okay. I'm going to go Hatton. I don't care. I'm going to use Hatton in DFS, so I might as well double root for him. So we'll go that way. So I have Tyrrell Hatton and Dustin Johnson. You have John Rahm and Patrick Reed.
Yeah.
Okay. Any final thoughts for you, Brandon, before we close up shop for today?
I know a lot of what we said was like it just depends on popularity and stuff, but I think that's super important this week. You can make the process case for almost every golfer in the field. That's why they're down to the final 30. So This one's less about finding the best picks and more about thinking about how to win a tournament.
So do what you can to judge popularity, consume a lot of content, like not just us, obviously, because that's just one piece. Consume a lot of content, see who's getting talked at the most. If you have fan share, check out that. But just try to decide who will be popular and then decide if there are alternatives in that same range you can go to or ways you can avoid that range altogether. But I think I agree with Brandon. Usually I'm someone who is a little bit less caring about popularity. This week you have to be, though, especially because there are good alternatives. So be very mindful of that and let that dictate where you go a pretty good amount of the time. That is all the time that we have for today. As always, a quick reminder to make sure you are subscribed to the FanDuel YouTube page where we do record this every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Again, the NFL podcast will be on there on Mondays and Thursdays. The Solo Shot, 9 a.m. every Monday through Friday, and also our DFS Q&A, 4 p.m. Eastern every weekday on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook pages. Make sure you follow us there. Also, check out the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. Brandon, if people have questions for you on Twitter, where can they find you there?
I'm at Gdula13, GDULA13.
And I am at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer from the video side of things here today. Thank you, Cal, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck with your DFS lineups for the Tour Championship. We'll talk to you again next week. More PGA coming your way here on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire.